Welcome to Academy Live. Amanda's off today, and I hope she's having a fabulous time. But today we've got a great show for you. Jake Necessary is here, and we're going to be talking about managing remote employees, right? What a relevant topic in today's world, right? So let's all learn together on how to build a high-performing remote team. Let's bring on Rex and Jake. Hey, Rex. Hey, Jake. Great to see you here. Really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation with us. Jake, tell us a little bit about you. I would like to call it sometimes we call it a humble brag, but we want to know more about you and a little bit about why was this topic so interesting to you?
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me today. I'm excited about this. I've been in IT roughly about 30 years. And over that time, most of it has been spent as a remote employee, and that's been quite a challenge, at least in the early days, whenever technology wasn't kind of clicking along with remote work. However, in today's society, it's kind of the norm, especially since COVID. And I was working on my doctorate in business leadership, and this topic I'm pretty passionate about, so I decided to do some deeper research. That's kind of how I got into this whole business leadership and remote work type of research.
So firsthand experience, and then kind of diving into it. I want to get into what you learned, and one of the things we want to talk about. You mentioned something in the prep for this about intentional design, and I want to hear more about what that is. But real quick, Rex, as we were talking, also, this wasn't. Remote wasn't a grand design in your leadership or management when we started working together, was it?
Well, so when I started C-Level in 2010, my first employee, right? I was in Seattle, and my first employee was Ken Sponsler in Greeley, Colorado, right? So from the very beginning, I don't know that I set out to design it to be remote, but we ended up being 100% remote. Through the 11 years prior to the Pax8 acquisition, we never actually had an office. I remember Pax8 sent me a request, right, for like a picture of our office, and I submitted a picture of the mailbox, like the little square mailbox at the post office. They didn't think that was very funny, but I did. And it ended up being we were 100% remote. And I really ended up leaning into, I just want the best talent from wherever they are in the world to be part of this company servicing our clients. And even with Pax8, my partner enablement America's organization is just under 100 employees right now. And there's a couple people that may go to the office occasionally, but really it's 100% remote. So I'm really interested in what Jake has to say here. So what do you think, Jake? Welcome.
Well, thanks a lot. About intentional design, I would say that most companies don't necessarily design for an intentional remote office. However, kind of what happens is you end up with a few remote people. You have a whole team that is completely on site. And what I mean by intentional design is once you have that first kind of employee that's a remote employee, you have to intentionally become a remote organization. You can't leave those folks as an island. And so at that point, once you have one remote employee or one virtual employee or even a hybrid employee, all your meetings, all of your actions as a leader should be really focused on the idea that you have people here and there. And your job as a leader is to kind of bring everyone together virtually so everyone has kind of a voice. So that's what I mean by intentional design is you have to be intentional as a leader. Once you transition from an all physical office, you have to kind of transition to this whole idea of everything is going to be remote. And that way everyone is involved in the discussion and the teamwork.
I imagine that, like, you found a lot of organizations, it's accidental where they've kind of started to embrace the remote workforce. Is there a common pattern? Like, is there a certain point where there either has to be a transition to industrial design, or there's more focus on intentionality that most businesses experience?
Well, first, I would say that again, intentional design is more about the leader has to intentionally understand that he has remote and physical employees. Um, I I would say that businesses don't really plan to go that way, but at some point, the talent pool that you're pulling from in your locality is not going to really help you as far as building the education and the level of knowledge within the organization. Whenever I did my study, I found that leaders of high performance teams really have three kind of factors that impact their performance. And the first factor is the development of the team. So and when I say development, I mean the knowledge, skills, and abilities that each of the employees has. That education that they have adds to the overall organization. So a leader can only be successful, or a company can only be successful if a team has the right people with knowledge, abilities, and skills. And you may not have that, in Southeast Virginia or Northwest Tennessee, or whatever part of the world that you're in. And so as a result, you can naturally move to remote. Now, COVID accelerated the whole thing. So during COVID, companies went remote because they absolutely had to. And then now people want to be remote. And I found this in my study. Most people wanted to be remote or hybrid. And many people said if I had to choose where I was forced to be at a physical job, I wouldn't take that job any longer. So almost everyone that I talked to during the study, which is close to 40 hours of interview time, had that opinion. And so that's kind of the way that companies kind of transitioned to this remote environment. COVID forced everyone to go remote very fast.
Hmm. And transitioning, so the next topic we want to talk about is systems and clarity. So tell us a little bit about how that impacts, a high performance remote team.
Sure. So going into the study, I had this idea that people wouldn't have the right tools to be a remote employee. But what I found was quite interesting. People had too many tools to be remote, and they were getting overloaded with all these tools. So do I go to email? Do I go to SharePoint or Teams or Slack or whatever product? Do I use Zoom or Teams to have a meeting? And so what was happening and what I found is that organizations overload people with tools, and there's really no framework on which tools should I use in these situations. That kind of goes back to the training of the team, is to kind of understand when do I use what tool. And leaders must define the tool that they're leveraging for certain functionalities. Having too many tools will destroy communication, which is a pillar of a good and high performance team.
And I imagine that it sounds really simple, but I imagine the impact of choosing and having those, kind of, this is a tool for X and how you use it. I think, whether you take Teams or Slack or the open communication, um, I've talked to a lot of organizations that have struggled with expectations. You know, should you expect an immediate response? What do you have for your notifications? When do you use email versus that? How do you share a file? Making it consistently, taking the time and effort to spell that out has got to have a huge, impact. Um, can you give me any examples of ways people have been successful in addressing the overwhelming amount of tools or the ineffective use of tools through, you know, how are they providing that clarity and definition to their workforce?
Sure. So I think when we look at the efficient use of tools, it goes back to defining if this is going to be a 2-second activity, you should potentially use the instant messaging collaboration tool that you have. If it's a formal communication or a formal action, you should use email or a more formal type of activity. I think the thing that we have to look at, even in a physical arrangement, I'm in a hybrid situation, and sometimes I'm 2 floors down from somebody who just needs me to walk up there and look at their computer, right, or help them with a technology challenge or that kind of thing. Same thing in virtual. You can't walk there, but you can pick the phone. At some point, you have to kind of make the decision to pick the phone up and make a phone call. And so a lot of it just has to do with the individuals and setting some guidelines, and then everyone follows using those tools, and then the team will work out the nuances that you have. Like, well, this just took too long today, so let's this should be done on chat, or next time just give me a call. And I think as the team matures together and they learn to click like a puzzle, they will understand when it's best to do one thing or the other. But the problem is when you have too many tools, and maybe part of the company uses one tool and another part of the company uses another, that causes all kinds of issues. And I found that in my study as well, where different departments leverage different tools. So the organization really needs to establish the tool set that's used, and frankly, the people in the field and the people physically at the location should have some kind of input to that. Because if you take a tool that no one really wants to use and you're kind of force feeding that down from the command of the management team, then you end up cutting that communication, because people will still go use the other tool anyway. So you have to have kind of buy-in, that kind of thing, in the tool set that you pick, and then everyone will naturally use it.
Jake, what about things like goal setting or EOS rocks or objectives and key results, and how using certain frameworks help with the systems and clarity with remote users?
Sure. Well, I think the most important thing about remote users and that attitude is that people that are remote kind of are a type of personality that kind of get the job done. You're not going to hire a remote employee that you have to micromanage, because you simply wouldn't want that type of employee as a remote employee. And as far as that goes, you would want the employee to kind of run their own day to day type of activity. So instead of looking, maybe they spent 6 hours today online working during 8 to 6, you would want to work more towards an OKR or a goal type of setting. And it's very important, even in a traditional team or a remote team, to set those goals so everyone understands what you're shooting for. And then you become more of a results-based organization, and not a I punch the clock from 8 to 5 type of organization, because most remote employees won't punch a clock. They will be, they'll be working at different times for different things. And that kind of leads into the whole idea of a self-governing team. When you talk about a remote team, that team needs to simply self-govern themselves. So the leader kind of has to step back a little bit and help facilitate the team, because now you have a group of people who are self-governing themselves.
It's a great segue from there. This topic, I think, you mentioned, I remember kind of you talking about this as kind of almost a shared leadership model. Can you talk to us about what you kind of mean by that, and what are some of the common characteristics or things that need to be shared?
Sure. So I think this is really important going into this. In my first drafts of my research, when I was doing all the literature review and things that you do in a doctorate, one of the things that I wrote about was self-governing teams. And frankly, my administrative chair didn't believe that was a thing. And so it took a lot of convincing as far as from existing literature. And then once I conducted my study and the research, self-governing teams really is kind of the wave of the future. The whole idea is that the leader does have to step back And then each member of the team really they understand what needs to get done. And so uh, those items have to be completed, become their goals, their things that they're trying to accomplish. And then the leader themselves does not need to set up from some pedestal and kind of demand these things need to be done today or these things have to be done. The team that's remote knows what has to happen because their OKRs are set and then their goals are set. Let them drive the ship as long as we get the ship to where it needs to be. And that's where the self-governing teams come in.
And I think in that, one of the things I remember, it takes a little bit of a mindset change. I like you kind of said that there wasn't a lot of buy initially from the chair when you were doing this. You kind of had to almost sell this through the experience and your study and the research. But I think some other things about that I remember you talking about were kind of trust, right, is a huge component in this. Um, and allowing for that autonomy. I think some people have a challenge with shifting from the old mindset of what a leader looks like, how they act, what they do. I think you say, command and control, versus kind of empower, trust, allow for some autonomy. Um, can you talk a little bit about, or maybe you saw in your studies, companies struggle or transition, or maybe where those that embrace that saw success?
Sure. So I've been using an acronym called TEAM. And so when I think about when we're building a team, the first thing in team is trust. And so team trust, empower, accountability, autonomy, and then a mutual leadership. That's kind of what team means to me. And so before you can
Hmm.
have mutual leadership, you have to establish trust and autonomy and empowerment within your team. So you have to give the reins to the team folks for this shared model to work. And so, what I found is that depending on the organization, and the type of leader, what a traditional leader can be successful in a virtual environment, but they do have to change their tactics because they have to give up control, and then they have to empower the individual that's working within the organization to make decisions. And so then it becomes the idea. I follow this leadership model called intent-based leadership, which I would say to my boss, I intend on doing this or I intend on doing that, not can I do this or can I do that, because I'm empowered to make that intent based leadership happen. And then there's some trust that has to happen. The leader has to trust that I know what I'm doing so I can make the proper decision. Um, and then um, and then I have to understand that the leader's handing me that trust. So together we have a dyadic relationship that puts us in a position to where you can make those type of decisions on behalf of the team. And then, inevitably, if you make a decision that potentially didn't go the way the ultimate leader would have made, then there's a discussion that happens, and over time, that relationship strengthens. But the whole idea is you got to have the team in team, which you got to have trust, you have to have empowerment, autonomy, and then all that leads to the mutual leadership or the shared governance model that you should have within a high performance team.
Hmm.
So, Jake, I was trying to follow the M in team is mutual leadership.
It is.
Yeah. Okay. So
So I'm using
trust,
M.
empower, autonomy, mutual leadership.
Correct.
It reminds me a
And
lot of the book Drive by Daniel Pink, right? It talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And giving the team purpose, I think, is really important, that they that kind of that culture, that mission, vision, value, core values, having that purpose clear, what everybody's working on, I think is what keeps everybody going throughout the day when they're working in whatever their own remote environment is. Um, can you kind of talk a little bit about that and corporate citizenship a little bit?
Sure. So when I think of corporate citizenship, it's kind of a bigger picture. We have employees that are scattered all over geographic regions, and this whole idea of having a bias against a remote employee, not intentionally, but having the discussion around the water cooler, or having a meeting, and this person's remote, we'll just have a quick discussion around a table. That's where initially we talked about the idea of expanding the meetings to, once you have one employee, everyone is involved. That's where this corporate citizenship, or a first class citizen, comes into effect. A person who's remote is the same type of citizen within the corporate culture as someone who's physically there. And so this is where the leaders have to be intentional. Again, is my intentions are to be purposeful and intentional about making sure that everyone, no matter where they're at, are a part of the team. And then you don't have people kind of stuck off in islands. And that's the worst thing you can do in a team. It drives a wedge into productivity. It it kind of kills trust, autonomy, empowerment, if people aren't part of the decision. So I like to talk about having a voice, and in the corporate world, or in your citizenship, and that includes people that are remote, and people that are physical, and people that are hybrid. And so leaders should be very intentional about making sure that everyone is included in the decision making process.
You know, Pax8 had our office space prior to 2020, right? Was the cubicle farm, right? Like everybody was expected to come to the office, and then COVID happened, and the cubicle farm never really did fill up again. And so we recently moved. We have a new office, and we refer to it as Destination HQ. And it wasn't built as a cubicle farm. It was built specifically to create collisions between partners, vendors, and Pax8ers. Um, when you are in the office, it's about colliding with other people, because we are working so much remote. Any thoughts on how we just completely reimagined what an office might be like?
Sure. So um, I think it kind of depends on the company's mission and goals, and kind of what they're doing. But when we talk about a corporate location, I think you build a place, a destination, just like you all have named the HQ, where individuals that are remote and are hybrid are coming into a group setting. Usually that is to collaborate. So you have to build an area of collaboration. I worked for a hotel organization years ago. We had 1,500 plus hotels worldwide, and our new office design was totally radical. We had spaces of long tables and couches and things like that. And I thought the guy was crazy that designed it, to be honest, at the time. But the reality is, those created almost a home feel for discussions. And so people would pull up to a couch and start talking about work, and then roll your sleeves up and get a lot of things done. So making it a destination is kind of an interesting concept. And then maybe people don't have cubicles. They come in and grab whatever's available, and you drive people to the couch. You drive people to the long table, so you can be a family, and be a citizen within the organization.
It's fascinating how, again, back to your point of intentionality, even though the physical space has an intentionality about it too, even though it's we're really supporting the remote space, and you're talking about all the elements of that. It's funny how, though, even with the hybrid or having that office space, the intentionality around how that's used and the purpose to support why people are there and what they're doing when they're meeting. God, there's so much here, but I kind of want to give you an opportunity. Any final thoughts? anything we didn't cover, things you'd like to say, or maybe some calls to action that people should consider in, developing a high functioning remote team.
Sure. So just going back to the basics, I probably beat the dead horse on this, but being intentional is super important. I think if we define the tool sets that we need, and we put some parameters around that. One thing we didn't mention that we probably should is deciding on a decision-making matrix. Like, how are we as an organization going to make a decision? And it can't just be we all get on a call and vote. Like, there has to be some kind of thought process to it. So high performance teams, they need to have goals that you establish. The individual people that are on the team need to be empowered. They need to have autonomy. The leaders need to be intentional about making sure that those things are happening within an organization. And then by setting goals and establishing ways to make decisions about business, I think at the end of the day, you're going to create a high performance team and ultimately drive the organization to reach its potential and exceed. So that's the way to I think to have a really good leadership team and good followers. And then I'll just close with this to say that in a virtual environment, really you have a group of leaders. So with that self-governing model, every individual that you have is a leader. And so as long as every small component, every person follows the team attitude when they're working with others, then they'll elevate the whole team. And then eventually leadership is actually part of the culture of every person that's on the team.
Well put. Some really great stuff here. Jake, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you being here. Best wishes on all your continued work and study around this topic. Thank you.
Thank you all.
And
Thank you, Jake.
now, next up is our Keith Marciano and our sales pitch.
Today's a really special edition of Sales Pitch because it marks the 2-year anniversary of these segments. Time flies when you're having fun. Over the past 2 years, we've tackled a whole bunch of topics to help MSPs like you grow your business and improve in sales. People usually ask me, how in the heck do I come up with so many baseballisms around selling? Well, I would say it's hard, but really it's not. I'm passionate about both. I love the game of baseball and the art of selling. Yes, sales is an art. It's also a skill, and in the end, all we're really doing is helping businesses solve problems, right? So connecting the great game of baseball with selling is a lot of fun, at least for me. So let's touch all the bases on 4 things you can do to learn more about selling IT services. 1, the Results Selling Framework on Demand course. I was really proud of this accomplishment as it's helped many owners as well as salespeople just to be able to sell better. It's been updated and improved as well. So there are 7 courses, 20 minutes max for each one. So take your time and go through it. 2, the Results Selling Framework podcast. The guests I've had on the show are phenomenal, and they've talked about sales, but also operations, account management, security, you name it, we've talked about it. You can find the Pax8 Results Selling Framework podcast on YouTube or wherever you stream your podcast. 3, instructor-led trainings. We have 6 courses in Academy, all around marketing and sales. Each course takes around 4, maybe 5 weeks for 1 hour per week. So if you go to academy.pax8.com and go to the Results Selling Framework Hub, you will see all the instructor-led trainings. 4, sales coaching. One-on-one personal attention for you and or your sales team on putting best-in-class sales processes and tactics together while learning how to sell better. Of course, keep watching these Pax8 sales pitch episodes. What you may not know is I have an incredible Pax8 Studios team behind me that makes me look good. I especially want to thank my producers, CJ McCoy and Jen Houlihan, for all their hard work on these things. Let's take a look at some of the bloopers that we've had in funny moments from this past year. I made a lot of them. Hello, Keith Marciano, Program Manager for Sales and the Setting sales goals is a critical... Jeez, a whiz, Keith. Stop spending. Do it again. Every day is a big game here in IT. I don't know. I messed that one up. Flowers are beginning to boom. Whoops. IT service and industry. God, I screwed that one up. Sales strategy. While a treat. Nope. Do that again. Sales strategy. Something. Oh, sorry. That's a rep who not is. Redo that. I knew that I was going to stumble on that one. Or some of the adverse. Great blooper reel coming up. Thank you all for tuning in. Keep watching. So let's grow and play ball. Play ball.
Happy anniversary, Keith. I love those bloopers at the end, but they're just so real, but there's so much value in what you brought. So happy anniversary, Keith. Time is flying and you must be having a lot of fun. Well, thanks for watching our episode today. Be sure to check us out next week for a special live show. Our guests will be Lamara Thorne and Sophie Dowsett-Smith of Pax8. And we're looking forward to hearing all about their podcast, Athena Rebels. So please be sure to check it out. Thanks for being here. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.